Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. If you cannot tell, I am feeling better. I am not nearly as sick now, really just a runny nose. Everything else is gone. Don't know what I had. Don't care, honestly, just sat around at home. But now I'm back, and I'm in a somewhat working favor. So, I'm gonna get this video done. First out of the ones I need to do. And I'm going to talk about the comic book movies of 2021. Want to make sure I'm not too late on this. So, there were quite a few comic book movies last year. There were 7 of them. I'm not counting the animated DC straight-to-video movies, even though I did see some of them. This would be a whole lot to talk about. I'm talking about the theatrically released, or would-be theatrically released, superhero movies. I was planning on making one of these for 2020, but I really didn't feel like talking about any of them. The only one I could talk about that for long at all was Birds of Prey, which I had already made 2 videos on, or 2 videos that largely focused on it at that time. So as such, I didn't feel a need to do so. Here, I only talked about Spider-Man, The Suicide Squad, Venom 2, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. The other 3 MCU films were I didn't do. And 2 of them I originally planned on making videos on. So I just saved them for this. So I will briefly cover the ones I talked about. However, the majority of the video will be taken up by the MCU movies that I did not get to. So, without further ado, let's get started on the first release of the year, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I've talked about it before, so I'll be fairly brief. Zack Snyder's Justice League is okay. It's not really one I care about one way or the other, which is a good thing, because I hate its predecessor. That one I have a video coming up on soon, once I eventually get to rewatching it. But yeah, Zack Snyder's Justice League is okay. I don't care for how Zack Snyder does Superman or Batman, but Batman is better in Justice League than he is in Batman v Superman. So as such, I'm fine with it. And I don't really care for what he does with Wonder Woman here either, but that's because Wonder Woman really isn't in the movie for that long. She really doesn't play a large part in it. It does feel weird. Her scene is still kept in full at the beginning at first, but it makes sense because she's barely in the movie. Otherwise, the characters are better here than they were in the theatrical cut. However, I don't think this one's too much better because I liked the tone established by Joss Whedon's portion of the movie. Even though, yes, it doesn't fit with the other tone, and yes, it definitely wasn't good. However, that one's not really that good. And this one's a little bit better. It's okay. It's tolerable. I prefer Superman theatrical cut. I prefer all the other characters here. Besides Wonder Woman, she's pretty equal. Both these, she does basically nothing. So yeah, Zack Snyder's Justice League. 6 out of 10, I guess. Next, with a whole, 4 months in between. 3.5. Black Widow. Black Widow is also just okay. It really wasn't that good. Black Widow is a complicated one. It does tell something new for the character, but it's not something new for the MCU. It is a very by-the-numbers movie. Now here, there are some interesting characters. Particularly, their father figure and Yelena. Yelena is really fun in this movie. She has a really fun personality, and she gets to do a lot of cool things, and she gets to show a different personality than Natasha has. And I'd say she is way more interesting in this movie than Natasha is in this movie. And at the same time, even though I don't particularly like how they made him a joke, I did like the father figure and his overall complex emotions between his thing with the government and having his daughters, seeing his daughters all these years later after he gave them up to this government type thing just to be sent to jail by them. I do like seeing that complicated character arc. That is interesting. I do like that. But Natasha is not interesting in this movie, and the villain is not interested in the movie. The two main forces aren't interesting in the movie. And as such, I couldn't care. With Natasha, we've seen her way better characterized in previous movies. We've seen her personality put on a lot better display. She just feels like a generic Marvel lead here. And I really wish she was done better. Because she is a main Avenger. She deserves better representation. And this is the second female-focused Marvel MCU movie. And the first one wasn't that good either. I really want to like them. I want them to do something like Wonder Woman or Birds of Prey. But they haven't. They have not made me care. And that's the problem. And on top of that, both Dreykov, I believe is his name, I don't remember for sure, and Taskmaster are neither one interesting. Because Taskmaster doesn't talk through the entire movie. We don't get to see her have any motivations beyond just being controlled. She doesn't have any motivations of her own, and it makes her borderline one of the worst Marvel villains, just because she has nothing to do. She is disinteresting. I don't care they made her a girl. I like her in the I like him in the comics, but making him a girl would work if done correctly. But here, it's so uninteresting because it just does not do anything. She is just a tool to Dreykov, who also isn't interesting. He's just a stereotype of a sexist pig. He's nothing more. He does not do anything else besides just basically being a sexist bitch. He doesn't do anything else. He doesn't have any interesting conflicts. He's just evil to be evil, which makes him just uninteresting when you have nothing going for him. He doesn't even have any interesting lines or writing or actions even. Every action is done for him. He just sits around the entire movie until he dies. Because he has to die. He's a Marvel movie villain that isn't in Spider-Man. And as such, you can't be interested. The main characters, I can't be interested in the movie. And on top of that, like I said, it's a really generic movie. It is written very generically. It has a basic story of a fetch quest for the first half for the villain and to take down the bad guy for the heroes. It is like the story for an RPG, open world RPG. It just is so generic. But there's not much there to get you interested, because like I said, Natasha isn't interesting in this movie. You don't worry about her once, because you know she dies later on. And on top of that, the cinematography really isn't anything special. The VFX are just average Marvel VFX, besides a couple of scenes where they are worse. And overall, it's just very typical. It is very disinteresting. I've watched it 3 times and I haven't cared a single time. I really wish I could like this movie, but I don't. Because nothing here seems to want to make you care. Nothing here is worth anything. It's all just a by the numbers movie. It's really standard, has standard writing, directing, and style, so I can't care. I've given it a 6 out of 10 for a while, but I really think I'm going to drop this one to a 5. Really do not care either way, because it's just so disinteresting and plain. Compared to some of the other movies I gave a 6 this year, it just does not go with those. Whew! I get to be positive again. Because now we get to talk about my favorite movie of the year, The Suicide Squad. And I've talked about it before, so I will try to be brief. But I love The Suicide Squad. In comparison to Black Widow, it has a much more interesting story. It has much more interesting characters. It has much better writing, directing, style, and VFX. It blows Black Widow out of the water in all of those aspects. But that's enough of comparing them because they are different movies. But the fact this movie is able to handle as many characters as it does is really impressive, especially when only 2 of them have been featured in previous films. The only ones of the main characters featured in previous movies are Rick Flag and Harley Quinn. And they are both exponentially better than they were in the first Suicide Squad. For Harley, I would say she was better in Birds of Prey, but Rick is probably my favorite character here. And he was one of my least favorites in the 2016 movie. He had nothing to do there and was actively pulling the team back. He wasn't interesting and didn't help the story, just pulled it backwards. So as such, I didn't like him there. Here he has a lot more to do. Everyone has a lot more to do. Everyone's actually useful at least twice. And overall, it's very, very well handled. Well, every one of the main characters, a lot of the smaller ones don't have anything to do but die. But yeah, love the movie. I've been spouting about it since it came out. Pretty obvious. 10 out of 10. Best comic book movie of the year. Now next, it's another one I get to be positive about. Shang-Chi. I liked this one. I do. It's very interesting. It is written a lot better than Black Widow. And this one is fair to compare. It is a single hero Marvel movie and is relatively inconsequential for a large part of the runtime. Shang-Chi does have some stuff that'll probably give consequences to later movies, in fairness. But overall, it's a lot less involved than movies like Avengers or the new Spider-Man. And I really liked it. I like how they characterize Sean in the movie. I'm just going to call him that so I don't have to worry about getting criticism for not knowing how to pronounce the name. So, I love how they characterize Sean in this movie, how they introduce him and how they build him up as a character. I think he is very interesting here. You see his downsides and his upsides. You see his growth when he was younger. You see how it affects him as an adult. You see how all this connects. And the villain is his father, who he grew up with for a large portion of his life, and who he knew as a little kid as a very caring father who slowly fell apart after the death of his mother and his father's wife. And the villain here is very interesting because you see that complexity. He's been alive for thousands of years, but this woman gets him to settle down despite all of it, and they grow a family, and he leaves that life behind until she dies. He is willing to set down everything for this family, but it all turns sideways when when she dies. So when he hears of this chance to bring her back, even though it is pretty clearly false, when he hears this chance, he is desperate. He is willing to do anything to bring her back. It is very interesting to see how it grows, how this character grows, even just through one movie. And you get to see Sean's comparison about realizing it's fake despite the desperation himself to bring his mother back. You know he would love to do it, but he realizes he can't. And it's very interesting, and you get very involved seeing the conflict there. And you get to see the sister too, how she felt when Sean abandoned them and stayed in the city. You get to see how it affected her, how she felt betrayed by him, and how she had to do everything on her own, how the loss of their mother affected her, and how she feels about everything. It's all complex characters, and they all do have interesting stories. Besides Katie, she doesn't really do much besides be the best friend. However, I am glad they did not make it just a standard love relationship like a lot of the other Marvel movies. I'm glad they're just friends. I'm really glad about that. But yeah, like I said, the characters are really interesting here. They drive the story, they drive the interest, they drive the motivation to watch the movie and to be entertained. And on top of that, the action in this movie is really good too, which helps entertain the audience more. Because this is some of the best choreography in the MCU, in my opinion. It has a lot of inspiration, and it's done really effectively. We see and feel the punches rather than it just being people tossing each other around. And we see them actually fight rather than just push each other. And it feels very involved. And on top of that, the set pieces for them are really interesting too. And yeah, I'm really surprised by this one. I had hoped for this one. This was the one I had the most hope for this year, just off the trailers. But I'm still surprised how good it was. I am really glad it was as good as it was. 9. 8 or 9. I'll give it a 9. Next, we have Venom, Let There Be Carnage. They look like they're making out here. Venom, Let There Be Carnage I've talked about before, but it's very fun. It is a very fun movie. I do not like it as much as I liked it then. It was largely the hype. It has some pretty mediocre writing. There is some really stupid stuff the characters do and say. But at the end of the day, it is such an entertaining movie. And it has such an interesting duo leading it. And it has an interesting villain to be the opposing side. So, that's well handled. Eddie and Venom's relationship is really well done. It's really well focused on. And I really liked it. I enjoyed it. And I enjoy how they take these characters in this new direction with them, previous from the first one, and we see them in this more standard relationship rather than being hunted after by those military guys, or the scientist military guys the entire time. That was really fun to see, and to see them just living a standard life, and how they have issues beyond just fighting other guys, how they have issues with each other that they have to overcome. I like that quite a bit. And I like Carnage's more goofy side quest of just trying to get married and kill Venom. It is a very weird but simple structure. It's not world ending. It's not even city ending. It's just the serial killer and another killer trying to get married and kill the main character. And it makes somewhat sense for Cletus, not as much for Carnage. But yeah, it is a very entertaining, simple movie. It fills an hour and a half pretty well. It is short, it's sweet, and it's probably the one I'd rewatch the most. besides the Suicide Squad, out of any movie released this year for CBM, comic book movie wise. 7.5. 7.5. Venom gets Venom 2 gets a 7.5. Okay. Next, we get to talk about Eternals. I sounded frustrated with Black Widow, but like I said, I didn't really care either way. I was just explaining my criticisms. I did get frustrated by Eternals quite a bit, especially around half a week after seeing it. It is by far the one I thought the most about after reviewing. It is by far the one that made me think and comprehend it the most, which could be seen as a good thing because it's making you think. But it's a bad thing, because it's not making me think about the random ideologies and stuff. It's making me think about how any of it makes sense. It is a very rushed, but simultaneously slow movie. You can't tell what's going on, but it still feels like it's moving at the pace of a snail. It feels like everything is just happening all at once, but it's all happening really slowly. So you can't tell what's going on, but it's taking everything so slow that you should be able to tell what's going on, but you can't. It makes no sense, but it's super slow. And even after seeing the movie, I still don't feel like I've seen it. It feels like the movie itself was just a trailer for the movie. And that is such a weird feeling. I really did not like that. I rewatched this movie just before coming in to do this video, and I liked it less. I did not like it. It is so boring. All the actors just feel like they're sleeping their way through the movie. Most of them are good actors, but none of them, besides 2 or 3, feel interesting in the slightest. Gilgamesh, the guy playing him is doing a good job. He feels like he's actually trying to do something. The guy who's playing Kingo feels like he's trying to do something. And Angelina Jolie as Athena feels somewhat involved, but she even feels like she's just sleeping through the movie. All the others feel like they're doing nothing. They just feel like they're just doing this to get paid. And I think that's how some of them are. Salma Hayek is barely in the movie. It was clearly just a name to put on the movie. She serves a purpose somewhat, but she barely does anything herself. They could have just brought it up. Or they could have had a smaller actress play her. But no, it's another name to attach to the box. So we gotta have her there. They picked all big names, most of them associating with pretty good acting. Like we have Kit Harington and Richard Madden, both of whom are good actors. Neither one of them feel like they're interested. Kit Harington seems the most interested in the post-credit scene. Everywhere else, he feels like he doesn't care that much. And I can't blame them, because I wouldn't have cared. Because it is such a sluggish nonsense that I wouldn't have cared. It baffles me. The general actions of the Eternals don't make sense. How they randomly decide to save Earth after having this purpose for all these years doesn't make sense. The thing is a week away from happening, but the big celestial guy tells Cersei what he's planning for no reason. It's like he wanted them to revolt. There was no reason to tell her. It was within a week of happening. There is no reason to tell her. It makes no sense. It's just to move the plot forward. Kingo leaves just to move the plot forward. He's there, but he leaves before the final conflict starts. Why is he here? He does nothing at the end of the day. He is literally pointless. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't have character growth. He's just there to be funny. And I really am pissed off by that. They waste this good actor to play this character that does nothing. He's like the only one trying here for like half the movie. But he does nothing. And Phastos is just so misguided throughout the movie. He initially doesn't want to help them save Earth, but he has a family. He should be the one most involved, besides Kingo, who also has a big connection to Earth. But no, Kingo doesn't fight because he doesn't care about the Earth, and Phastos initially doesn't go because he thinks the people are bad. But he has a family. He has a reason to fight. And yes, he does go and fight, which does make sense. And while I'm talking about him, I know if I don't, I'll probably get criticized for it. Yes, there's gay representation here. And yes, I am glad that they are moving that forward. I am glad they actually show that. But it would have been better in a bigger way, where they couldn't just cut it out for international release. Because you know they did it small enough so that they could cut it. So that they could release it in really homophobic places. But yes, it is a step forward. I am overall happy with it. I am glad. That was fine with me. I am glad they did that. But yeah, Phastos also makes no sense with that. He doesn't make sense here. And Cersei is like the only one of them. Cersei and Athena are like the only ones that make sense throughout the movie. They have actual reasons to do what they do. But like I said, the actress playing Cersei does not feel interested. So it removes a lot of that from the hit. It just feels like it devolves a lot of that. And Athena actually makes sense. She's crazy, basically. So she actually acts that way. She has these two different sides. She is the only character I really cared about in the movie, because she's the only one given a character arc that both feels done well by the actress, and feels properly done in the story. She is the only one I thought they did anything decent with. And as such, she's the only character I really cared for. But yeah. And, what's his name? Icarus. Icarus makes no sense. He initially starts off helping them, turns on them, and then ends up helping them, and then flying into the sun. He moves back and forth so often, and then they kill him. He's one of the characters that could have been the most interesting with his turnaround on the team. But no. Just move him back onto the team and then kill him off at the end. Because they don't want to pay Richard Madden for another movie until they see whether this movie succeeds or not. And that annoys me. It's so inconsistent. Same with Sprite. She has such a big connection to the main one, played by Salma Hayek. But at the end of the day, she betrays the team to help the killer of that main Eternal, which makes no sense. And then Makari and Druig are both so inconsequential to the movie, they could have just been removed. They do nothing here. We see the village, and that's all Druig does. And then Makari literally just shows up, goes fast, and then does nothing. They are both so worthless. They both could have been cut. They should have been cut. This should have cut like 2, 3, or 4 characters. I could have seen those two and Kingo easily being removed. All three of them end up doing nothing for the story. They should have been removed. Because, like I said, this movie feels too fast and too slow at the same time. It is not moving fast enough, and the characters are not developed enough. So they should have made room for these characters to get better developed. Or if they wanted all 10 of them, they should have just made it a series. That's what I think at the end of the day, is it should have been a series. It should have been a series of like 6 to 10 episodes. I think 10 would have worked the best. Have an episode to develop each character as the main character of that episode. Have a whole episode going back on Salma Hayek's character. Have her character fully developed. Have all of them fully developed. You know, focus on maybe have Sprite or like Makari and Druig or something. Have a combination of two characters for one episode so you can have the big final one. But yeah, should have been a series. However, I did like parts of the movie. It does have decent action. It is interesting. It has some interesting ideologies. It is very interesting in that aspect, especially if it was done better. And it does have some really great cinematography. And I am really leaning when a movie looks good. Dune, I didn't care for at first. I think I will more when I read the book. But I didn't care for it much at first. But I still gave it a 6 because I liked the cinematography and acting. I was very leaning with that movie considering I said I was bored and didn't care about the story. That's the same thing I'm doing here. Because I really liked the cinematography and the action here. I really liked all the technical aspects. It is a technically involved movie. As such, I'm giving it a 5, I think. Maybe a 6. Don't know. As much as it offended me more than Black Widow, I cared about it more. And I would say it is better than Black Widow. But is it a point better? I don't know. Chalk it up to a 5 or a 6. You can... I don't care. One or the other. It's not good. It's one of the weaker MCU movies. Okay. One more movie left, and then we're done. And then we're finally done with the video. We got to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. When the first trailer came out, I said I wasn't interested. I said I didn't care for the trailer. It looked like a very messy and confused movie. I saw the second trailer, thought the same thing, didn't make a video on it because I felt it would have just been repetitive of the first. Because I recorded me reacting to the trailer, because it was basically the same thing as the first trailer with my reactions, so I didn't upload it, because I didn't just want to make the same video twice without any reason. But I stand pleasantly surprised. All the fan service here is done really well. It carries the movie. That and the second half also has some great character work. We get to see how Aunt May shakes Peter's life and how even at her death, he's still moving forward because she's taught him all these things. We get to see him grow, to see why he doesn't kill Pete, why he tries to avoid killing his villains. We get to see why he cares rather than him just caring about that because he's Spider-Man. We get to see why, even though Green Goblin has done all these things to him, he doesn't kill him at the end. And I'm glad about that. I am really glad about that. I love what it does with that. And I love how they do Green Goblin. I love how they show both the sides. I liked him better in this movie than I did in the 2002 movie. Because I love how they showed the dynamic. After like one or two scenes, you don't really see that in the 2002 movie. Here it is an entire thing. We get to see how the two different sides play. And we get to see how the Goblin and Norman both play off of the other side. And it is very interesting. And it is a very fluent showing of it. And I love how they show the other Spider-Men in this movie. I love that they're not there just for a brief cameo, and that they don't have this big, grand entrance. I love they just enter in a more modest way. That is a very interesting way to do that, considering all the other times we've seen big introductions like this in the MCU. It's been big, grand introductions. So to see something different like this for arguably the biggest introductions in the series was a really fresh way to do it. And that I love they're actually characters in this movie rather than just, oh, hey, look, it's that guy from those other movies. They get to grow as characters, especially Garfield's Spider-Man, my favorite Spider-Man. They grow him even more, and I am so glad about that he wasn't made a joke here, that he actually got to grow, which I was really worried about at first. When they met at the tower, that was really cool, but all the jokes they were making about him and stuff was really, really not fitting that well with me, so I was really worried. But they have it turn around with Tobey's Spider-Man calling him amazing and stuff. I love that they do show that side, and I am so glad that they do. And I love that they have that closure for Gwen, and I love all of it. And Tobey doesn't do much here, but he still is definitely interesting. He does get the weaker end, does get the shorter end of the stick than Andrew does, but he still is a fun little character in this movie. But at the end of the day, despite that, there is issues. What I was worried about did come true. It is a really messy movie. It does not make sense much at all in the first half. We see him go through all these people, and then we see him meet Matt Murdock, and then all the charges are dropped off screen. We don't see any of it, so we don't know how it happens. We're just expected to go along with it. We see the MIT thing happen, so we got to Doctor Strange, they fail the spell, and then he goes and talks to the counselor, and then a villain that is his fault shows up. So she almost dies, but because he saved her life after screwing the situation up, he gets a chance at MIT. It's very messy in the first half, but the payoff is great. I love how it's done. I love the payoff, and I am glad this movie exists. Just that mess up on the setup does keep it from a 10. But it is a pretty solid 9, my opinion. If they didn't do the second half so well, if the second half's a little closer to the first half, it'd probably be like a 6. But because the second half is so good that it makes the first half kind of shaken off, it is a 9. But it is not shaken off enough to be a 10 like a lot of other people are giving it. I could not give it that. 9. Really solid. Love the fan service. There's all the main Marvel and DC movies of 2021. I own all of them, but the ones that haven't came out physically yet. I own all the ones that are out physically, as seen here. Zack Snyder's Justice League, Black Widow, Suicide Squad, Shang-Chi, and Venom. And I am planning on picking up the other 2. But yeah. Thank God I got this video out of the way. Well, anyways, that's it for this video. Hope to see y'all later. Peace out.